85% of the nitrite and nitrate we get from our diet comes from green leafy vegetables. Only 5% comes from eating cured meats. And then the other 10% comes from swallowing our own saliva. So if that were the case, people that eat a plant-based diet would have 10 times higher rates of cancer than people who eat kind of a higher percentage of cured meats. And we know it's just the opposite.
I'll tell you, the serum, I mean, that was a big hit at the last week's show. I honestly, I think the more visibility that product gets, I mean, it's truly a breakthrough. It's very cool. Okay, welcome to another Heartbeat Happy Hour episode. I'm your host, Anthony Turturro. I'm here with my dear friend, Dr. Brian. How are you, sir?
Good.
Good.
Cheers,
my friend.
Here's to another Heartbeat Happy Hour.
Hey, you got a bang in Texas.
That's right.
So we had a busy week last week, huh?
Yeah.
A little travel.
Now we forgot. We forgot the most important tagline.
Oh, okay.
Where the pulse of science resonates with the rhythm of life.
True.
You know, that's a very, like, I mean, you put a lot of thought to that. I mean, there's a lot of truth to that because really medical innovation comes from the pulse of science. And so with each kind of new invigoration or new discoveries, you know, we take that, kind of unwind it, and then put it in a language that most people can understand, adapt, and then employ into their daily lives. Because innovation means nothing if we can't include it in our daily lives. So I think it's a really poignant tagline, so I like it.
Should we cheers again to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Cheers. Well, here we are.
Here we are. So where were we at last week? Palm Beach,
Florida at the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine.
Yeah, where you got to speak. What was it, on Sunday?
Sunday afternoon, yeah.
Yeah, that was a good talk you had.
Look, it's a good event. The the Ep-4 is probably one of the preeminent anti-aging longevity conferences out there. They've been around for 25, 30 years probably.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's where you go and really see the latest, greatest kind of new innovations, product technology, up-and-coming disciplines in medicine. So yeah, it's always good to go and, again, keep our finger on the pulse of science and new anti-aging medicine and longevity techniques.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what I saw out there as far as anything really kind of new. I did see a couple different like needling type of products there, some supplements, a lot of gene therapy type of stuff, which...
Yeah, there were no epiphanies for me. I mean, honestly, my opinion is probably 85% of the things that are there are kind of what I call Me Too technologies.
Yeah.
Nothing really differentiating. It's companies, I think, for the most part, good companies with good products, but really no great kind of life-changing products. And I think that really, it's good news for us, because, you know, we've been doing this for a number of years, and we have actually product technology that actually works.
Yeah.
And in fact, we've been criticized by some of the other vendors there and from the organizers of the company, because we actually take an analyzer, an objective measure of nitric oxide, and then test our products, test other exhibitors' products, and to show the attendees there, they're spending their time, their resources, their money on these products, and we can demonstrate objectively, unequivocally show that our products produce nitric oxide where no other nitric oxide product from all these other exhibitors there deliver on the nitric oxide promise. So, you know, and in fact, one of the original founders of the A4M said, look, he goes, if all our exhibitors put their products to the test like you guys do, you would be the only exhibitor in the room. And I go, well, that would be fine with me.
Yeah. You know, it's
obviously that's their financial model, is to get...
It's like, how do you kind of take that too? Because, you know, at the same time, you would want representation of actual efficacious products that work. And I know some people get upset that we test products and so forth, but at the end of the day, they know what they're launching, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And if their product works or not, if they're just trying to ride the wave of the science that's out there. And that's one thing that bothers me. because you have people who buy these products that don't work, and now they don't believe in nitric oxide.
In the science, yeah.
Because the marketing of some other product they just got into, they purchased it, doesn't work. And, you know, that person now still has issues, but is not willing to look at nitric oxide as a beneficial product.
Yeah,
so.
And that's the problem with big companies is they follow fads and they follow trends. What differentiates us is we create fads. We create the trends, but that are based on science. So the latest fad really over the past 5 or 6 years has been gummies and chews. Yeah. You know, putting ingredients or nutrients and vitamins in gummies or chews, which is like the absolute worst thing you can do, because you basically poison that ingredient. And the last thing Americans need is more sugars or gummies or chews that cause cavities, disrupt the oral microbiome, and completely shut down nitric oxide production. So, you know, with any fad, it's just that, it's a fad. These companies will introduce products, ride the wave, but once consumers figure out and they survive the life cycle of that fad, they'll realize, oh, well, that was a really bad idea. Yeah. And so I tell people all the time, you have to get rid of gummies and chews. You don't need vitamins in gummies or chews. Take vitamins straight from the source, clean powders, products. You certainly can't get nitric oxide from a gummy or a chew because, number one, it's a hydrated matrix. And again, nitric oxide's a gas. The other thing is just the numbers don't work. You've got a 1 to 2 gram gummy, and you got to deliver, if you're delivering beets in that gummy, you got to deliver 6, 8, 10 grams of that to see any efficacy on that. So, I mean, it's the source of our daily frustrations and differentiating our products and from all the other so-called nitric oxide products out there. But, you know, that's why we educate and inform. That's why it's important that we lecture and have a presence out there. And, you know, when I look back 10 years when we started at the A4M and lecturing, you know, I was the only player in town who talked about nitric oxide. Yeah. Really the only lecturer for many, many years. And now, just this past week, there were at least half a dozen lectures that were either nitric oxide centric or mentioned nitric oxide. Yeah. And the interesting thing is I look at the speakers who spoke on nitric oxide. And then what I do is I just go to the literature and see, are these people experts? Have they published anything on nitric oxide? Are they scientists? Are they a talking head? And so what we're finding is that these companies go out and pay these clinicians a speaker's fee or sponsor them in some capacity to give lip service to nitric oxide. But these people have never published a single paper on nitric oxide. So how can they? So it's encouraging to see kind of the growing awareness around nitric oxide and more people speaking on it. But it's fortunate that I spoke the last day because now we have to clean up, right? We have to go and clean up all the misinformation from what was said by these talking heads that have no science background and really convey the true science around nitric oxide. So it's good, it's getting more exposure, but we just have to, you know, do damage control and really correct the ship and talk about what true nitric oxide product technology is and what it does.
Yeah, I mean, how many years do we have in the supplement world? Like over a decade?
Yeah, almost 15 years.
Yeah. And, you know, what I've noticed is candy started transitioning to gummy. Yeah. And then kids supplements got into gummy and then transitioned, of course, to your adults and then seniors and so forth. And I feel like a lot of companies took advantage of a couple different areas where consumers are focused, which is price and taste, right? And for consumer awareness out there, if you are buying because it's cheap, because it tastes good, that company is specifically building that product just for those reasons, not necessarily for the benefit. And what companies can do is take a single ingredient and put a certain amount of that ingredient and then make a claim based upon science that was done outside of their product.
Yeah, in isolation, with that ingredient in isolation. Yeah. Not in a sugar matrix, not in a gel matrix, because it basically inactivates that.
Exactly.
And the other thing, too, look, it's brilliant marketing strategy. but it's horrible science because we know sugar is the most addictive substance on the planet.
Yeah.
So if you want to acquire and retain customers, give them something that they become addicted to. What's the most addictive substance? It's sugar.
Yep.
Consumers want to take something that, one, that tastes good, and two, the companies want them to keep buying. So you put something that's addictive in there, it's sugar, these sweeteners, and now it's a great financial model, but it's at the demise of real science and at the demise of the individual's health.
True, and I forgot what the stats were, but I mean, we have by far the biggest supplement market in the world, medical and so forth, but the unhealthiest population.
That's right. Now we know why.
Yeah, it's like, if you just take a step back and look at it from a bigger picture, it's kind of like you look at what we're being pushed to eat. What is the food pyramid now? I mean, it's Fruit Loops, the newest thing that is getting pushed. I mean, that should tell you everything, right? And who benefits off of an unhealthy population, right?
Well, it's drug companies and big food companies, because in a lot of these, where companies are merging. So, they provide the unhealthy food choices so that you become dependent upon the drug therapy that they use to treat from the foods they recommend.
Yeah, and it's a
beautiful financial model, but again, it's at the expense of our health.
Yeah, this is where those big financial firms come in and they start buying up the majority of companies in different areas, the distribution, the pharmaceutical, the food, the actual farms. You name it. Now you actually have control of a system.
Yeah.
So
it's intentional, it's strategic, but it's not to the best benefit of our own health.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing for consumers is to always do their own due diligence, right? I mean, yes, a company can tell you one thing, but do your own research. I mean, a good example of that, and you actually had it in your talk this last weekend, about sodium nitrite, right? Yeah. And people have been led in the past, I forgot how many years back this was, with hot
70,
dogs.
80 years, yeah.
Right. But you had a slide that really broke it down, just pure science. It wasn't opinions, theories, pure science. And I think it really simplified it, but made it to where it's like, okay, yeah, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
If you'd kind of speak on that.
Well, again, that goes back to the 1950s when it was first started showing some associations between people who eat cured meats and certain increased risk of developing some gastroesophageal cancers or gastric cancers. So in nutritional epidemiology, you start with associations. So people who eat this certain amount of food have a higher degree association of certain clinical outcome. And so what people do is look at an exposure and then correlate that with a clinical outcome. So for years, the nutritional epidemiologists were thinking, okay, cured and processed meats have a slight, maybe 10 to 15% increase, what's called a relative risk index, which is really, it's a statistical way to manipulate numbers. But let's just say it's an increase, a slight increase. Then that's an association, but it's not causation. So you have to basically check the boxes of all these different criteria to establish causation.
Yeah.
So one of the first is a biologically plausible mechanism. So the nutritional epidemiologist 50, 60 years ago go, okay, nitrite added to cured and processed meats can form low molecular weight nitrosamines. Low molecular weight nitrosamines are mutagenic, carcinogenic, and can cause cancer. So then, if A plus B equals C, then they put this together and they go, oh, well, if nitrite causes nitrosamines and nitrosamines cause cancer, then nitrite causes cancer.
Yeah.
So if that were the case, let's just take broadly speaking, if that were the case, 85% of the nitrite and nitrate we get from our diet comes from green leafy vegetables. Only 5% comes from eating cured meats. And then the other 10% comes from swallowing our own saliva. So if that were the case, people that eat a plant-based diet would have 10 times higher rates of cancer than people who eat kind of a higher percentage of cured meats. And we know it's just the opposite.
Yep.
And now I think in 1973, the Code of Federal Regulations changed in the U.S. at least, where any nitrite-added meat product, you have to have a certain stoichiometric amount of vitamin C, which inhibits nitrosative chemistry, or they use now erythrobate. So I think that myth has been completely debunked. We focused on that in my book, Nitrite and Nitrate in Human Health and Disease. I encourage people to read it because it really talks about the history of it. We've got nutritional epidemiologists that talk about that whole science.
Yeah.
We talk about a plant-based vegetarian diet and how that contributes to optimal health. And so, that's what we call advancements in science. We know today is different than what we thought 50, 60 years ago. And so that's just the evolution of science. And so now we have to apply that and integrate that new science and knowledge into our daily practices. Yeah. So I tell people all the time, you shouldn't avoid hot dogs, bacon, cured meats because of the nitrite. In fact, now we know nitrite is cardioprotective. It has anti-cancer. But a balanced diet in moderation is what's key. But you shouldn't eliminate, if you want to eliminate something, eliminate sugar.
Yeah, seriously.
For sure. And so, high protein meal, throw in some green leafy vegetables, a balanced diet in moderation, reduce your caloric intake, reduce your sugar intake. It's really that simple.
What was the electron breakdown that you spoke about?
Oh, so on that, there's these, there's still a camp out there, and it still surprises me because I think you still have well-intended people who are trying to convince their audience that you should avoid nitric oxide, and that nitric oxide is toxic and dangerous, and if you're taking nitric oxide supplements, you should stop. So a lot of this comes from the methylene blue field. Other parts of it comes from just, I think, people who just don't understand the science. Yeah. Or who haven't read the literature in maybe 30 years. But, it's like if you read the literature, you can find anything you're looking for. So let's just take, for example, ulcerative colitis or inflammatory bowel disease, where if you look at the literature, you'll see, and you take biopsies, and you'll find an increased production of nitric oxide in that particular pathology. So in these scientific papers that look at the data, they interpret it, and they go, oh, nitric oxide is present in ulcerative colitis and inflammatory bowel disease. So then their interpretation is nitric oxide contributes to the pathology of ulcerative colitis. So it's not causal. And an example I use is when there's a crime, when there's a robbery or murder, cops always show up. But if you're an outsider looking in at this crime scene and you see the cops at the crime, you could interpret, if you're naive, oh, the cops caused the crime. Why is that? Well, because they're there. Yeah. Did the cops cause the crime? Nope. No, they're there. Of course they're there. Did nitric oxide cause the crime? No, it's there because anytime there's an inflammatory insult or an infection or some type of wound healing or repair mechanism, of course nitric oxide is going to be there. But it's the cops. It's not the robbers. And so that's where most of the data is misinterpreted. And then there's another camp out there that talks about a molecule called peroxynitrite. And really, I think it's a very important reaction because when nitric oxide reacts with superoxide, and superoxide is a toxic oxygen radical. It's a free radical that damages, leads to oxidative stress.
How does that radical get generated?
Well, it's part of normal oxidative metabolism. Okay. Right? It's produced through our mitochondria. Okay. And it's produced intentionally by oxidative enzymes like NADPH oxidase, which is part of our immune response, oxidative burst. And that's necessary because it kills bacteria, kills infections, and it leads to, wound repair. But so acute inflammation, acute oxidative stress is part of our innate ability. So it's just part of the normal process, part of utilizing oxygen as a substrate to generate ATP or cellular energy. Okay. So it's just a consequence, but we have to control it. So when you have uncoupled electron transport chain in the mitochondria, then you generate too much superoxide. And there's some people, specifically African Americans, have an upregulation of NADPH oxidase, so they create too much superoxide. So how do we mitigate that? Well, you can downregulate, inhibit NADPH oxidase. You can recouple the electron transport chain. You can recouple the NOx enzyme and mitigate the superoxide production. But there's always going to be some present. And really one of the antioxidant roles of nitric oxide is it scavenges the superoxide before it has a chance to cause oxidative damage. And that chemical reaction is when NO radical reacts with superoxide radical, you get a molecule that's ONOO minus.
Okay.
And this is where it's very important to have a degree in biochemistry because you have to balance equations.
Yeah.
And we have to account for all electrons. So that ONOO minus was a molecule probably 30 years ago, first discovered by Joe Beckman, McCord, and Fridovich, who discovered these superoxide dismutase enzyme. So you look at all this reaction chemistry, and they thought, okay, it's toxic, it's damaging. But fast forward 20 years, and we recognize now that ONOO minus is the chemical structure of NO3 minus, which is inorganic nitrate. So this molecule, this intermediate, basically just rearranges into a more stable complex to kind of stabilize the electrons, and it forms inorganic nitrate, which is the molecule found in green leafy vegetables.
Really?
Which we give, right?
Yeah.
And then there's enzymatic pathways, thioredoxin, glutathione peroxidase, that take that cage-like molecule and immediately metabolize it into inorganic nitrite, which, again, is a cardioprotective, cytoprotective molecule. So the beauty of what nitric oxide does is it takes away a toxic, damaging molecule, superoxide, and converts it into a cardioprotective molecule, nitrite and nitrate. So there are no issues with nitric oxide. In fact, it's part of its antioxidant properties.
Yeah.
So all these people out there saying, avoid nitric oxide, stop taking nitric oxide supplements. I think you should stop taking supplements that are marketed as nitric oxide that don't generate nitric oxide. That's sound advice.
Yeah.
But our products, we generate a certain amount of nitric oxide over a certain period of time. We control and dictate the metabolic fate of nitric oxide. We mitigate the oxidative stress. We reduce inflammation, and we prevent the immune dysfunction. And that's what nitric oxide does. All these other people out there who are telling you to not take nitric oxide, stop taking nitric oxide supplements, number one, they're just naive, and they don't understand the chemistry and the biochemistry. Or number two, they have an agenda. And so obviously everybody has an agenda. Understand their agenda. Yeah. If people that are trying to get you to take methylene blue every day, then they have to instruct and inform you that nitric oxide is toxic because methylene blue completely inhibits nitric oxide production and nitric oxide signaling.
Yeah.
Now, is that a good thing? In my eyes, probably not. But, I think there's some benefits of methylene blue, but I certainly wouldn't advise people to do this every day to completely inhibit nitric oxide production and nitric oxide signaling. So, what our job here is, again, keeping our hand on the pulse of science, is to understand all these kind of reaction kinetics and mechanisms that come out. And it's not to say that I won't change my stance in a couple of years, 5-10 years, if new science comes out that tells us otherwise.
Yeah.
But today, based on my 25 years in the science of nitric oxide and reading, literature that dates back to the 30s, 40s, and 50s, it's very clear to me that nitric oxide at the right dose, at the right time, in the right patient is extremely beneficial and therapeutic.
100%.
So all these other talking heads are just, again, they have an agenda or they're just naive and ignorant.
Yeah, or they just aren't continuing to update their knowledge.
That's right.
And I find that a lot across the board. And it's actually kind of interesting too, when it comes to just look at insurance companies. Why does an insurance back up like functional medicine?
It screws up their algorithms.
Yeah.
If you're going to insure a life, when that underwriter writes a policy on your life, they know exactly based on your medical history, almost to the month and date that you will expire. Because we've got, hundreds of years, and we've got actuaries that actually take that data and put it into a form. Obviously, insurance is big money. There's big money in insurance. They're for-profit companies. So they're never going to underwrite a policy where they're not going to make money on it. Obviously, accidents happen, and that's why we buy insurance. But if you're buying a full-term policy or a complete policy, not even term or full life, they know exactly, and they're going to price that to where they're going to make money collectively on all their policies. So if you start integrating functional medicine and all these biohacking longevity techniques into that, it would crash the insurance industry. Yep. Or, it's going to cause the consumers more out of pocket because they're going to pay longer on that policy. Or the term's going to expire because they're going to live longer, and then they've been out that money that they've paid for a term policy.
Yep.
So it's a complete game changer. in actuaries and writing insurance policies, because this changes everything.
Well, it greatly impact that industry and the pharmaceutical industry.
For sure.
Right.
Well, look, modern medicine is the third leading cause of death around the world, or at least in the U.S. So prescription medication that's gone through the rigor of safety and efficacy through the FDA is the number 3 killer in the U.S. So are these drugs safe? I would argue not.
Yeah.
But obviously that's why you go through a full medical history, and they want to know what medications you're on, how long you've been taking them, because they know that that's going to contribute to the accelerated death of you. Third leading cause of death in the U.S.
That's crazy.
I mean, so we have to, once we can empower people to take control of their own health and give the body what it needs, remove from the body what it doesn't need, there's no need for pharma. At least the pharma as we know it today.
Yeah.
Synthetic compounds that are inhibiting biochemical reactions. You know, our pharma development is completely different. We're not using pharmacology, we're using a restorative physiology. Okay. So in that model, where we're giving back a molecule that's naturally produced in the body at doses that recapitulate normal production and signaling, there can't be any side effects.
Yeah.
Because again, it's restorative physiology. It's not pharmacology. Completely different.
That's a good point. Well, I mean, that's actually a good start to the next topic of therapeutics with nitric oxide.
Yeah.
What do you think right now to date is probably the most used therapeutic with nitric oxide in the medical field?
Well, the only approved medical indication through the FDA for nitric oxide itself is pulmonary hypertension for premature babies.
Okay.
So these neonates that are born prematurely, usually the lungs are the last organ to develop. So if you're born premature, a lot of times these babies have underdeveloped lungs, they've got a mismatch in ventilation to perfusion, and they develop pulmonary hypertension, which can be deadly. So the only effective treatment, safe and effective treatment, is inhalative nitric oxide therapy. And I think this has been used since the 80s, so 40 years of not only safety data in premature babies, which are extremely fragile and susceptible. Oh, yeah. So if nitric oxide is safe and effective in the most fragile patient population there is, you know, babies born 27, 28, less than 30 weeks, 32 weeks, and it's saving babies' lives, normalizing pulmonary pressure, allowing them to incubate to where they can fully develop and then live a long, healthy life, then it's not foreign to assume, and we don't even have to assume, now there's clinical data, that it's safe and effective in adults. And in fact, there's off-label use in adults with pulmonary hypertension, cardiopulmonary bypass. But that's an inpatient medical intervention, right? It has to be delivered really in a critical care unit by a physician, because we have to monitor the dose of nitric oxide, have a flow rate that doesn't allow for the dioxygen reaction to reform nitrogen dioxide, which is a pulmonary toxicant. So this has to be done in a very well controlled environment by an anesthesiologist, by a physician who knows how to deliver that therapeutic dose of nitric oxide. Okay. So now, as we know the therapeutic benefits of nitric oxide, how do we deliver nitric oxide safely and effectively? Yeah. And that's where we come in. So we make a solid dose form of nitric oxide gas. We make a topical nitric oxide dual chamber. So where we deliver nitric oxide at a certain dose over a certain period of time, that's not only safe, but we're finding that it's very efficacious. Yeah. And that's the basis for our drug discovery program through Bryan Therapeutics, is our solid dose nitric oxide lozenge for ischemic heart disease for Alzheimer's, our topical drug for diabetic ulcers, non-healing wounds. And I think that's going to transform healthcare. Oh, for sure. I'll tell you, the serum, I mean, that was a big hit at the last week's show. I honestly, I think the more visibility that product gets, I mean, it's truly a breakthrough. It's very cool. Well, it's a new category and it's a game changer in aesthetics, skincare, and beauty. Yeah. Because as we all know, all skincare products are designed to mask or hide the fine lines, the blemishes, the age spots. And women use makeup as a cosmetic, right? And why is that? Because it covers their blemishes and it basically masks it. And so then there's these products that you use, whether it's hyaluronic acid or vitamin C, And I think there's some good data out there.
Yeah.
But consumers have to trust that it's working, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. With our topical serum, you see it right before your eyes. Within a couple of seconds, you see your skin turn pink.
Yeah.
Which is reflective of increased blood flow. And I think everybody out there would agree that improving blood flow and circulation and oxygen delivery to every cell in the body is probably the best thing you can do, because all chronic disease is associated with low oxygen, low perfusion, and decreased energy production.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can improve blood flow, circulation, oxygen delivery, then that's the best anti-aging therapy there is. So our topical nitric oxide serum opens up capillaries, recruits capillaries, causes increase in blood flow and perfusion, and you can actually see it right before your eyes.
Yeah.
And it's mobilizing stem cells. It's getting rid of old cells, replacing them with new cells, improving collagen deposition, improving hydration. So it addresses the root cause of aging skin, and there's no product like it in the world. And now when we take that to the next level of developing therapeutics, obviously these are skincare products designed to improve the tone, texture, and clarity of the skin. We're not making any drug claims. But as we take this technology through clinical trials, for non-healing wounds, for diabetic ulcers, it's a game changer because it kills the infection in the wound. It gets blood flow to an otherwise ischemic and hypoxic wound bed, and that's the reason it won't heal, because there's no blood flow.
Yeah.
So when we apply the serum, we kill the infection, we improve perfusion, deliver oxygen to that wound bed, and the wound heals. I mean, it's
amazing.
It's a grand slam ball in wound care, and I'm really anxious to get this through clinical trials, because it'll save billions of lives around the world. Just in the U.S., there's 65,000 Americans that die every year in nursing homes from infected wounds.
Wow. They
develop sepsis and they die from it. And it's completely unacceptable, because there's technology today, and we'll get this through the FDA, we'll get it approved where physicians have access to it, that'll save the lives of hundreds of thousands of millions of people.
Yeah, I could only imagine, too, for combat and stuff like that. I mean, when I was in Iraq and they had to put the pins in my hand, there's 100% infection rate for any type of metal entered into the body. It's crazy.
Well, yeah, look, I mean, that opens up a whole new kind of venue for care in the military and, on the battlefield wound care. I mean, I think this will be a mainstay.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I'm excited.
I'm excited.
It's the challenge is pioneering it into a new category space, that's saturated by big brands and so forth, and a lot of paid marketing. So what I love about having real science is real benefits.
Yeah.
So as long as someone gets to try the product, I mean, they fall in love with it.
Yeah,
so.
No doubt. But here's the problem, and you made a good point. Good science dies on the vine all day, every day, because of poor marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And shitty products thrive all day, every day, because of good marketing.
Mm-hmm.
So our challenge is we have indisputable bona fide science, products that work. Mm-hmm. Now, when we combine that with superior marketing, I mean, Katie bar the doors. We're unstoppable.
Yeah.
And I think that's what I'm excited about. The team we've assembled here at our companies is we have superior science, and we have some of the greatest minds in marketing and building brands and differentiating our products from all the other crap that's out there. So we're a force, and we're just getting started.
Just getting started. Cheers to that.
Cheers.
That was a good discussion today, man.
Yeah.
That was good. Well, if you learned anything at home, make sure you like and subscribe, and stay tuned for next week's episode. Thank you for joining. Have a good day.
Thank you.